All right, with that, I'll stop presenting and turn it over to Jenny Lancaster.
Thank you so much, Jess, and thank you to INCOSE New Zealand for having us this evening. My name is Jen Lancaster. I am a Technical Director for Systems Engineering and Assurance here at Aurecon, coming to you today from sunny Melbourne, which is also the lands of the Wurundjeri people. And I'd just like to acknowledge both their connection to the lands and waters on which we reside, but pay my respects to the elders past and present as well. Hopefully the IT will work and I will be able to share the presentation that we have. Bear with. Okie share. And I have to confess, when you mentioned, Jess, that I'm following Grace, Grace is an absolute superstar and my old university supervisor from many years gone by. So with some trepidation, I now stand before you attempting to follow that. I'm not the only person here today, and by the time I put my presenter view up, I will not be able to see the rest of you anymore, so I apologize. This was indeed a double act with my colleague Alex, and so Alex is with me here today as well. Sadly, we could not get the full conference room camera, so you're getting my little laptop camera. All righty, let's see if we can get this show on the road. As Jess has already introduced, this is about a case study with South Australia Water. We have been working with them for about 2.5 years now to try and implement some systems engineering concepts into what they were doing and help their capital delivery programs, basically. This was presented at the Systems Engineering Test and Evaluation Conference here in Melbourne last September. And this was as part of the tailoring stream. So those of you who were there and were able to see the papers and the abstracts, this was part of that piece. I've already introduced ourselves, so I won't go over that again. But if you haven't heard of Aurecon before, it's worth just touching on what we do. So we're a design, engineering and advisory company with that really deep purpose of trying to bring ideas to life. So this isn't about just building a thing. This is really understanding what the client needs and trying to deliver that in a holistic fashion from cradle to grave. We've got a heck of a lot of complex challenges across the world, and we're quite lucky that we can operate in a lot of those spaces. Personally, my background is defense and aviation, ended up getting pulled into rail and rail infrastructure. They haven't let me blow anything up in years, and I have to admit it does wear on a body after a while. But you can see a lot of the other areas that we work in there as well, water being one of them. So what we're going to share today is a brief case study of how we tailored the good book, the INCOSE handbook, into a real-world application, and how we worked with our client, SA Water, to really identify the key needs that they were trying to achieve and generate a tailored SE framework for them. We're trying to take their existing corporate methodology and just map it to those systems engineering concepts. We're also going to talk about how SA Water has been trying to embed that framework within its governance. As anybody who's tried to do this kind of change before will know, drawing a pretty picture on a wall is only half the battle. We've then actually got to get it into the governance system and make sure it operates as, you know, the new way of working. Finally, we'll talk a little bit about the lessons that we've learned through the implementation phase and the common traps that we would just like to make people aware of. I think we'll keep questions to the end, and that way we don't have to worry about going backwards and forwards on the IT. So hopefully I'll see plenty of questions in the chat when we get to the end. So a little bit of an introduction about South Australia Water. A very long history, older than Australia as a country, really, all the way from 1856 through to now. An awful lot of people operating across a broad range of disciplines, and you can see immediately the geographic area that they're operating across, all the way from where all the people live at the bottom of South Australia, pushing up all the way into the interior as well. So not only do they have to deal with the geography, they also have to be able to get the water to the places where it needs to be, which can be a very long distance in some cases. And I'm just going to have to shrink this because I'm losing my speaker notes. Lovely. Okie dokie. Yeah. We are part of a joint venture with KBR, supporting SA Water through what we call the FEED contract, which is around front-end engineering and design. So we've been with them as a partner for several years, but it's only in the last couple of years that they really started knocking on the door around systems engineering. But it really doesn't take more than a cursory view of the local news headlines to understand why we need to start implementing some of these systems engineering tools and concepts. Infrastructure in general is just too damn expensive. And as we all know in this economy, that's something that we need to really address sooner rather than later. The need for infrastructure development is never going to go away. This is a growing country. There are always more people. But we need to recognize that every time a project goes over budget, that means that's a hospital or a school that's not going to get built, because if you looked out the window here, you'd see the Westgate Tunnel, which is probably 2 or 3 years behind schedule at this point and a considerable chunk over budget. So we need to make sure that we're playing our part as systems engineers in making sure that our clients, and by extension, us as taxpayers, are actually getting the most out of our money. One thing we really do have going for us as a discipline is the strength of our own people. SA Water first started looking at systems engineering in 2021 because there's an awful lot of people, especially coming from defense, who are very vocal about the benefits that the discipline can bring. And it's easy to see how those ideas can generate some traction when you're constantly seeing poor performance of your capital delivery projects. So SA Water was starting to get a new growing number of leaders coming in, talking about, well, we've seen good systems engineering in other parts and other industries. Why aren't we doing this already? This is a large, complex portfolio that we operate as an organization, and our management methodology at the moment is just not doing it for us. It's not dealing with the scale adequately. It's not dealing with the complexity adequately. So why don't we have a systems engineering concept already inside SA Water? And my experience as someone who's come from defense and only moved into infrastructure in 2017 is that the perception of systems engineering in the infrastructure industry is not good. Generally, it's seen as this complicated thing that we've kind of inherited from defense. It's just a bunch of process police who wander around with tick boxes after something's been designed and then start asking really nasty questions around where's the evidence for that? Just looks like a lot of unnecessary overhead when you can just back your client into a corner and shrug and say, well, we built it, pay us the money now. One of the things I'd really encourage people to do is take a look at the recent report from the Institution of Civil Engineers in the UK. They did a 2-part report, I think it was June 2022, around how infrastructure needs to really start to apply systems thinking and systems engineering principles. When you look at these big infrastructure projects like Crossrail, we've got Metro Tunnel here in Melbourne, there's several case studies in that paper from the UK, Thames Water, et cetera, they really start to talk in terms of, well, we were the constructors, we were the alliances trying to deliver these big infrastructure projects, and it fell down, and we think this is why. It was April 2022. I was close. And there's a direct quote from that report there around how front-end project development gives clearer project definition, creates a stable delivery environment, and improves stakeholder engagement and management. None of this is rocket science. It's all very much that, things that we are aware of as systems engineers, but it's stuff that quite easily gets forgotten about because everyone's so interested in building the infrastructure, they've forgotten to actually stop and think about what it needs to do when they build it. And one of the great things about this case study is it talks to a lot of evidence that we can start using in our conversations as SEs with our PMs and our design managers, and start talking to how much value the concepts that we understand and we operate under can actually bring. And this gentleman, Ed Merrow, who has his own consultancy, has actually started pulling some of this information together and now has a database of more than 20,000 projects, talking about how if you really front-end load your design definition at the front of the project, you can end up with 20% lower costs and deliver it 10 to 15% faster than your average project. Now, in today's day and age, where we simply do not have the money to allow these things to push out, that has got to be numbers that will resonate with your PMs and your DMs. So the first thing I'd like to talk to that we learned was to not throw the book at the problem. If we're going to reduce this perception that we're just a bunch of process police who have come from something, that's not really relevant to infrastructure, we need to really think about tailoring the process rather than just coming in with 15288 and starting to beat people around the head with it. Ask yourself, when was the last time you updated a systems engineering management plan or a safety assurance management plan and really thought about what needed and didn't need to be there? Or did you just copy the headings and start filling it in? We need to have an active part of this tailoring if we're going to show that we're adding value and taking effort away when it doesn't need to be there. So the lesson learned from this particular element, really take the time to sit down with your client and understand the problem and try and implement new change incrementally. Show that you're solving specific problems. Don't just come in with a framework and be like, here you go, guys, this will solve all your problems. We need to be able to demonstrate value really quickly. And to do that, you need to do it in small chunks. If we look at the common themes that we were starting to see when we sat down with SA Water and did exactly that, sat down, had these workshops, had these meetings. I think at one point we had about 50 people in the room, for everybody from asset managers to maintenance teams, and started asking them the questions around, well, come on, where are your pain points? Tell us what's not working for you so we can show you how we can help. These are the common themes that started to come out. And there is nothing on here that will be a surprise to anybody who has operated in this field. Scope creep, late inputs, rework that we discovered too late. The gate review process not working. How many times have we seen a project go sailing through a gate review because people didn't want to slow things down? The process is not supporting us in the ways that it needs to. And sometimes that's because people are ignoring the process. Sometimes it's because the process just doesn't have enough there to give people direction and guidance. And so we started thinking about the concept of incremental gains and what little things we can do to fix some of those problems and start to build up. And if anybody has read this book, Atomic Habits, you might have been introduced to this gentleman in the bottom right corner. This guy is Sir Dave Brailsford. He became the head of British Cycling in 2002. And at that point, the team was pretty shocking. They had practically no record of success at all. British Cycling had only won a single gold Olympic medal in its 76-year history. Between when he took over in 2008, when the team went to the Beijing Olympics, they took 7 gold medals home in track cycling. And then they went and did it again at the London Olympics 4 years later. And then 2010, he took over at Team Sky, which is a professional-based team, so even more results-driven than it was. And they won 6 out of the next 7 Tour de France. So clearly this guy's got an idea of how to improve teams from scratch. And the book does delve into that a little bit. Effectively, he looked at the team like a system, broke it all down into the different functions that go down to competing on a bike, and realized that if we just improve each of those elements by 1%, you're going to get a much greater aggregate increase in performance than if you just try and throw a whole lot of money at the delivery phase or the construction phase of the project. So what we did once we'd had that session with SA Water and we pulled all their pain points together is we really zoomed into the items in 15288 and the Systems Engineering Handbook to talk about the things that we knew could do the most good early. And it didn't matter that we didn't focus all of our efforts on the technical processes or all of our efforts on the organizational processes. It was about finding those little 1% improvements to generate interest and confidence that what we were doing and the path that we were leading people on was going to work for them. Having had that first sweep through the handbook, we were able to actually translate that into a first draft of a lifecycle plan, lifecycle model that really started to tailor the process down into different swim lanes. So we've gone from, okay, we think we know where your problems are and we think we know what we can deploy, to, right, this isn't going to work for everybody all the time. So we need to recognize that things need to scale on scope and complexity, things that are business as usual versus stuff that is new and novel. So immediately we were starting to look at tailoring what we were doing. That's then grown from that initial swim lanes diagram to a full-blown set of process maps. Now, this little life cycle across the top is the current corporate project management methodology for SA Water. And what we did is we took each one of those blocks and blew it out and said, right, these are the things we think you should do. This is the order we think you should do them in. And you can see the different colors of blue tell you whether you're using the light, the medium, or the heavy approach to systems engineering. We actually went and tested that at a large workshop in August 2023. It's like, we've heard what you've said, we've written some stuff down, printed it all out, stuck it all over the walls and said, right, tear it to pieces. Tell us what's not going to work. Tell us what we've missed. And what that ended up developing was a set of gate review checklists after that that said, all right, if this is how we're going to work these things, this is the support network. This is the piece that actually tells you what you need to do when, and therefore projects get some guidance and somewhere firm to stand when they're trying to understand what they need to do when. So the second trap I just want to talk about now is, don't assume you can just pick up a previous life cycle and reuse it. If it's not clearly relevant to your client, if it's not directly addressing the pain points that they've articulated to you, you are not going to build trust in the process. There was a previous set of consultants who had been engaged about 12 months before we came on board. And sadly, that's exactly what they did. They talked about all these lessons learned from defense, tried to articulate how a V model would work for SA Water, and it fell on extremely cold ground because they just did not show how it was going to fix SA Water's problems. We put a lot more effort into presenting, the existing work that was going on and making sure that what we were putting out there was going to link into what already existed. We tried to meet the client where they were, rather than trying to take them to the ideal immediately. Made that effort to translate what we were talking about into terms that they were going to understand, rather than trying to impose this new process on the top. If you are the bridge, and systems engineers are ideally placed to be that bridge between disciplines, people will meet you in the middle. You just have to make the first step. All right, so we've held some workshops. We've got some buy-in. We've validated some content. That was the easy bit. Now we've got to go through the hard part. Alex, you want to take this one on?
Yes. Right. So back to the problem. We weren't asked to produce a process map and a new way of working. We're asked to actually implement something. And in order to implement something, we had to have a culture shift, a different way of thinking about how projects are done, what we're actually aiming to deliver, and a shift that would allow us to implement a bit more of the systems engineering stuff. So what we found through all of our information discovery is that the problems we were solving had been obvious in the organization for a while, and we weren't the only people tackling them. So we'd made all our pretty maps, and in a lot of consultation found out that, yes, there were other initiatives doing some sort of interface management, others doing a level of governance control. And what we found was that in order for us to generate an amount of goodwill, and in order for us to really have a successful implementation, we had to take on these projects, adapt what we were doing to meet them and help drag them up the hill with us into solving this organizational issue. And so we did this so that we could have a little more control over the way in which this was unfolding, so that we could take these new ideas and sort of fold them into a systems engineering mindset. But it also gave us a springboard for future engagement by leveraging the engagement all of these other projects have done to reach more people at once, to spread our ideas a little further, and to gain a little more representation throughout the organization. And in doing this, we sort of became the default change in the organization. So things then saw us and tried to bolt into what we were doing, which really helped us to become that baseline way forward. So as we spread all of this good work and we tackled all of these different initiatives and got them on board, suddenly the word of what we were doing started to grow. There was a lot of enthusiasm, perhaps a lot of false ideas about what it was we could deliver and who we could save. And this leads to a trap, mainly that if you don't control that enthusiasm, you get too far too fast. So one of the main issues was what we'd done wasn't necessarily validated on a whole organizational level. But this meant that if we had too many projects trying to use what we're delivering, we probably could get some poor results because one, the training wasn't all necessarily there and we hadn't validated the outcome across all the possible kinds of projects. So those poor results could lead to poor perceptions and unfocused early implementation, as well as the knowledge throughout the organization of SE, could help spread those poor results far and wide, which would really hamper future efforts to rein it back in. So what we did here was, as we sort of said earlier, using our short-term gains. So as we implemented, we chose trial projects which could help us to demonstrate the best value and the best short-term gains. Pick a few projects that we know we can fix, go with them, and then let that word spread itself. And that perception of good out of SE would help other projects to pick it up and help keep our image positive. So in order to become these trial projects, we had to have some success criteria which would lead for their selection, because we knew that they would be able to deliver us these positive results. So they had to be the right stage of the life cycle, too late, and there was not enough we could do for these without spending a lot of money. So we wanted things that were early enough that we could define these needs, key decisions, assumptions, constraints, exclusions, whatever other bits we were implementing, and actually have that help the project and save them some money before they locked in the scope. We had to choose projects that had a good level of buy-in from all people in the project team. So through all of our consultation, we had been, as good systems engineers should, consulting people from all different parts of the life cycle, all different stakeholders affected, and interfacing across the organization. So we had a few different people who were quite familiar with us and were on our side. Similarly, we had people who were fairly critical of what we were doing. So we chose to work with projects with people who were perhaps a little more friendly to our cause, so that they would be more willing to do the work well and produce those successful outcomes. And thirdly, the projects that we chose, they had to have access to the tools. If they didn't have access to the tools, there'd be too many hurdles for successful outcomes. So we, instead of allowing this whole thing to just grow and grow and grow and fail more than it succeeded, we really tailored in what we were willing to trial with it so that we could produce good results early and spread that across the organization. This also led us to a bit of a challenge, which is that there was clearly an issue with how information was being generated and how it was being stored. And one of the main issues we came across was that configuration management was difficult because of the ways in which the organization was siloed and allowed to communicate. By making these systems engineering tools, we created a transfer of power within the organization that took that power of knowledge away from some of the historically higher up or more influential figures, which can lead to a bit of a backlash against what you're doing. So if you implement this in another organization, you have to be prepared that systems engineering tools do shift soft power, and you have to tailor your information strategy to minimize the impact of that. And that's, again, mainly due to the way that solutions now become data-driven. So there's less ability for key figures to impact the way projects go and more visibility on the way that decisions are being made. The next thing after getting all of our buy-in, having good bits of success shown is having those changes stick. So you can't run on the fumes of enthusiasm for the whole time of an integration. We need to have a way to ensure that this stuff is done, even when we leave and no longer support it. So we were able to integrate what we were doing into the governance of the organization. They had regular checkpoints anyway and reviews. And so we were able to bolt on some of the expectations we put on the organization, from different assessment activities to reviews and tools. But we also were able to join into this KAJV team, so to become part of that feed contract, the engineering engagement contract, which allowed us to support this as an ongoing initiative and provide additional training and feedback, which really helped to solidify us as a part of the team of SA Water and has built an idea of permanence of what we're doing in the organization. The next step in making this all successful is training and responding. So I think one of the things we found most important in all of this was having a change manager to help deal with the way that you communicate. We're systems engineers. We're generally meant to be people who understand communication and value and all these sorts of philosophical terms to help us understand where projects are going, what they need to achieve. But change managers are communications experts, and we should always rely on our SMEs. So we utilized their knowledge to help us to spread the good word and to help us to create good training, which was based on the roles and which reduced the amount of superfluous information we're getting around. As a response to the training, we also had feedback, and we included some of that feedback that we got into the materials we were delivering, so that there was a sense of ownership from the group, which meant that, if you have ownership into something and you're being asked to do it, you're much more likely to want to do that process, as opposed to something that's just forced upon you. So that responsiveness and understanding how to give and receive the information was really important to the success. So I guess the next trap in this is about tools and processes. So new tools are a bit of a novelty, and sure, all the registers we're delivering helped SA Water, but if the tools cannot really be used, then they can't be used effectively. They won't produce any good results. So as part of the training, we need to have testing and validation, which we got through our trial projects. And really that's about understanding how these tools get used, but not only that, but where the users want to find their tools, how they want to approach the tools, the layout that they want to see it in. So a bit of a human factors approach to how these tools get utilized. So yes, creating these processes and tools is good, but developing them to be more usable is even better in getting the best results you can. So what did we actually deliver? We've talked a lot about a tailoring approach and how we integrated this into the organization. What we did, and this is probably everyone's favorite graphic at the organization, we turned their linear model, yuck, into a V model, which had spaces for verification and validation in there, as well as traceability of requirements. So really what that looked like is that early on, we allowed some of the system and asset planners to keep the systems they had in identifying system needs. We found those were actually quite good. And throughout this process, we really wanted to recycle and reuse systems that were doing well across the organization, and just add some things on top of that, or change some of the ways they were doing things just within a familiar context so that it felt the same, but delivered better results. And so early on, we introduced a lot of things to help us identify needs, risks, and document some of our key artifacts, which helped to shape the project and constrain that design. Along with some verification steps, we got them to derive requirements, and then created some tools which helped them to track changes to scope, verify into the design, and finally verify against a contract later, which then leads to validation at the end of it. The initial results 6 months on, we've had about 30 trial projects, and now just recently, the things we've introduced have been mandated across all projects going forward. And so that's been a fun development. Some of our notable successes were at Ansi Hill UV, where we had PMs and design managers say that they've had unparalleled coordination between themselves and other stakeholders. For Happy Valley Filtered Water Pump Station, this was a project where there was a lot of technical talk between designers of pumps and electricals, which we were able to derail into talk about functionality and better communicate the success criteria to help us to identify what the solutions would be, as opposed to assuming solutions on the way in. So that project changed its shape entirely based on the discussion we had in a needs session. We also had a project like Clapham Inlet, where we were able to break something that seemed really complex into an actual really simple set of directives, which was more, we were able to discover what the bottleneck was in this project, which is mainly constraints and interfaces as opposed to actual mandatory outcomes of the project. So we've been able to help them change their mindset as to how they look at projects from scope into a set of artifacts that define a problem in a functional space. So to conclude, tailoring is built into the system, into systems engineering as a discipline. So everything we've talked about, from sitting down with your client, discovering their needs, consulting a broad range of SMEs, validating outcomes with them, verifying and updating tools with a human factors lens, that is all systems engineering. We haven't discovered anything new, but this is how we should be applying our discipline to other industries. So there's no cookie cutter approach, but there is a systems engineering approach. We had an opportunity to demonstrate value of front-end loading. We had to plan carefully for that implementation to make sure it didn't spread far and wide and ruin its own image, only a good image. We were able to demonstrate the benefits and use those incremental changes to demonstrate support. And we leveraged an integration with governance and training, which was fundamental to the ongoing success of this implementation. So we'll open it up now to questions. Anybody had any?
I will stop sharing at that point, see if I can turn this thing off.
I know that Hank in the chat has asked, how did you ensure that you were on the inside? I'm looking at this from two angles: systems engineering and collaborative action research. These two approaches are congruent, and I am interested in the collaborative aspect and reflective practice involved.
We got really close. Alex has got a lot of air miles now, because obviously we're both based in Melbourne. And, you know, when you've got someone, a client who's like, no, seriously, like, we don't know how to do this, so can you be here? The importance of boots on the ground cannot be underestimated. And the fact that we were present, you know, a couple of days a week for the first few months to really push it. We had a gentleman from the Aurecon Adelaide team who was seconded into what we were doing, and he was doing great work pushing it into the other areas of SA Water. We hooked in really tightly to the rest of the joint venture team. So we've had support from general managers all the way down, because they could see that even if they didn't understand what SE was, that they could see that this was going to grow our market share. And so they really wanted us to push this as much as possible. So you cannot underestimate the importance of just making a nuisance of yourself, but making sure you're smiling when you do it, so that, you know, people can understand that you're not just there to, it's not seagull consulting. We're not there to fly around, drop something and then bugger off. We're with them. We're helping this happen. The training that you guys have been doing, you know, it's literally holding their hand and walking with them until they're able to do it by themselves, because we're really trying to make the organization upskill. We're not just trying to invent more work for us. We're trying to help them get there as well. Yeah.
Thanks. No, thanks, Jenny. That's a great response, because I'm really interested in that reflective part of the interaction between the systems engineering team and the client, right? Where there's new knowledge being generated.
Yeah, and I think as well, there's and this is something that came up at the SETI conference as well. This idea that systems engineering, as much as we think that we go into industries and they can learn from us about approaches to things. There's a lot we can learn from other industries about approaches. And I think a lot of building good rapport was in the tailoring space, in the understanding that, we're actually not perfect. We have a philosophical way of approaching a project, but a lot of the things they're doing meets that. And so what of theirs can we reappropriate? How can we actually make them feel smart in the things they're doing, bring that in and show them that the change isn't actually that bad, and, bend a bit to their needs.
That's a brilliant case study, and it would be lovely to see that written up in 4,000 words using ChatGPT that we could use as a template almost, because it sounds very good. It sounds very good. Thanks for that, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Tom.
Yeah, thanks for an awesome talk.
You can't ask a question. You've seen this twice now.
Oh, I actually missed you at City, so that's why I was like super excited when we were talking about getting you here. Felt the same but delivered better results. I really liked that message. There's kind of a downside to feeling the same, in that the other teams that you're potentially working with are like, yeah, that's what we already do. How are you making this better? Did you have any problems communicating that you are introducing something slightly different? Or was there a
we perhaps might have oversold how similar the process was to what they already had. We took some elements of best practice, but ultimately, those were just cementing in across the organization good things that were happening. And then on top of that, we do have, things like needs and requirements and, the traceability and the verification processes. So I don't think anyone was questioning whether we were adding anything by the end of it. It seemed like quite a big sort of change, as much as we were able to consolidate it.
I seem to recall one of the workshops that we had. I think it was the guys doing like the pipeline works and the valve refreshers. And I remember one of them saying, "Oh, we do all this already." And I said, "Great. Where is that written down?" "Oh, well, we don't need to do any of that. We just know what we're doing." Okay, so what about the poor grad who comes in and hasn't got a Scooby-Doo? And how are you going to teach them how to do this? "Oh, well, we'll just sit with them and we'll work it through with them." Yeah, what happens when you get hit by a bus and that grad is the last person delivering that project and you haven't written it down? Oh, yeah. So much of this was in people's heads. The asset planners at SA Water, who, have been at SA Water longer than I've been an engineer, have it all in their heads. And what Alex was saying about the knowledge transfer as well. I'm not denying that you know your stuff, mate. I'm not trying to tell you that the decisions that you have made are wrong. What I want you to do is write it down in a place where if we need to challenge it, we know what the justification was. And if, God forbid, something should happen to you, we still understand why you got to that point. And so it was that, trying to meet them where they were by saying, this is going to help you. This is going to help the project going on, not, throw everything away and start from scratch. It was finding those little points of difference where we could go, 90% of what you're doing is okay, but you just need to take that extra step. You just need to write it down.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Jenny, I think that you are me. I cannot tell you how many times I have said the exact same things. Awesome. That's great. Where's it written down? Oh, it's not written down. What happens when you win lotto? Because I was once told that many of my examples of people leaving the projects were too morbid. So win lotto, leave project. Steve's got his hand up. Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Jess, and thanks for that presentation. It was a breath of fresh air. I completely agree. That there's a big risk of systems engineering being sold to this golden bullet to kind of solve all problems to all teams. And then just like you said, just looking at 15288 and going, here we go, as opposed to actually working with people and the actual challenges that those individuals and those teams face, and tailoring that process and planning towards it as well. So it's actually something I'm trying to work on internally. So it's great to see that actually that's already been done, and it's being successful. So that's great news. One thing that kind of stuck out to me was you mentioned that there were already initiatives that were already kind of set up to look at some of the challenges within the organization, and they were brought in following, I guess, the initial kind of process development phase. Was there any engagement with those initiatives and those teams, as part of that process development, or did you only discover that those initiatives were set up following that phase?
It's a little bit of both,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
bit of column A and column B.
There was a couple that shot up quite quick. There was a lady who was doing some work with asset planning, I think, or asset management, who we quite quickly got put in touch with. But it was genuinely that kind of, I think you described it once as when you open the car door in the circus and people just keep coming out of it. Because as soon as people found out what was going on, it was like, oh, well, what about this? And oh, we're doing this as well. And I guess it's indicative of very large organizations. Quite often you can lose sight of what's going on across the whole thing. And so this was an engineering-led, engineering being a division, it was a divisional-led initiative, but then we found out that there were other parts of the business that were trying to do something quite similar. So I think it can take a while sometimes to get enough awareness of what else is going on inside a big organization to then understand who you need to engage with. And organizational politics can play a part in that as well, because if you've got one part of the business that's really keen and another part of the business couldn't give two hoots, you can end up hitting a lot more barriers. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the big part of that as well was we were helped in the politics because we had a bigger backer. I think is a bit of that. Like
our sponsor was one of the GMs,
yeah, and that helped us to absorb a lot of these. But at the same time, it was more a bit of collaboration and trying to convince them that we were doing this change and that they should just bolt into our process. And it's already doing a whole bunch of maps. We've already got all this work, so why don't we just put your thing in the map and then you tell us the inputs and outputs and we'll deal with it. So it was doing a lot of extra work as well to try and establish the fact that we were the dominant change here. And then in the end, the organization did a much larger change that it bolted us into. And so we created this whole environment of massive change, which is probably a little too much change at once for everything to work out well, but we're dealing with that now. So that's that.
I think there's a lot of value in having something to establish yourself quite quickly as you might disagree with my idea, but my idea's on paper. Where's yours? Again, where's it written down, right? So the fact that we had all those process maps and we'd done the whole thing I think we'd done it for the first half. We didn't do all of it, but we'd done the first half of it. And there are people coming to talk to us and go, oh, what about this value engineering process? And we're like, well, it can go in there. Are you okay with that? And, oh, right. Okay. Well, where's yours written down? Do you want to give us yours and we'll see where it fits? Oh, no, it's all fine. I'm okay with it being in there. There's a lot of power in being ahead of the game in maturity, or at least looking like you're ahead of the game in maturity, because then it kind of deflates a few people, I think, in that regard. So, try and get there first. Try and make sure you've got credible, mature data and processes, and then try and convince by charm as much as anything else that they want to get on board and get in the same car as everybody else. Yeah.
That sounds good. Thanks very much. Great presentation again. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
There's a reason that negotiation and facilitation are both part of the systems engineering competency framework. So Luke's got his hand up. Go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, I'm going to be careful what I say because I don't want any more homework from Copilot. But so very good presentation. Thank you very much. It's definitely a challenge that we've had to overcome on many occasions in various forms. So I think you articulated your problem and your solution very well. I suppose my only question is what mechanism is in place to adapt the framework over time as the organization evolves to avoid falling into trap 2 should the process start to become a bit stale.
Very good point, actually. Have we, I know we're planning on reusing this with other clients, you know, so there's a genericization, if that's even a word, process that we need to go through to make it less water specific or less, you know, capital delivery specific. We don't have built-in feedback loops other than
The trial stuff.
the
which
trial stuff.
That's ongoing at the
Yeah.
moment as the new way of working establishes itself. I guess in terms of a long-term thing, though, there isn't anything we've planned for, but SA Water is a pretty initiative-heavy organization. If they don't think things are going well, they're actually quite forward in trying to change them, which is why they have 10 initiatives running around solving the same problem. So we, I picture the organization will probably be ahead of that, but we'll also hopefully be embedded for a while that we get to influence that when it comes around.
It's a really good reminder. So thank you, Luke, that these things don't just stop. They either die off and they need to be replaced with something, or they morph into something new, and it is worth remembering that that's part of the life cycle. Absolutely. Thanks for that. We'll take that one away and work on it.
Yeah, no worries.
I look forward to your 2027 SETI presentation on the same topic. I'd like to ask a question in particular more about how you made tailoring decisions. How did you decide what to include in light and medium and heavy? How did that decision process go? And how have you do you have enough data yet to say whether those decisions about what goes into which bucket, how we decide what light process is versus heavy, whether those definitions are sort of appropriate?
The first thing we did was try and draw out, based on kind of scale and as in capital outlay and complexity, kind of put those lines in the sand. So it was something like, if it was under 500K or something, it would have been light. If it was between 500K and 10 mil or something, it was in the middle. And when we did the checklist reviews with the first 6, we took a punt as to where we thought they fit on that continuum. But one of the things we really wanted to hammer home was, just because I tell you you're just doing the medium approach doesn't mean that you shouldn't look at the activities in the heavy approach and decide if they're valuable to you. So when you have things like constructability assessments or reliability assessments, you know, stuff that you do for the more complex sides of things, you might only have a really small job, but it might be in a really difficult place to get to, and it might be really hard to construct something new there. So look at the whole thing and pick the stuff that's right for you. The light, medium, and heavy approaches are really just there as a guideline. Now, I know for a lot of people that just means, oh, I only have to do light, so I won't do anything else. So there is definitely a uphill struggle in getting people to look at the big picture, but that's part of the training, really, is to go pick the stuff that works for you. If you can justify not doing something, that's fine, because you've actively tailored the process to your own project. But you need to look at the whole thing and use the whole checklist and have that conscious decision to use or not to use.
And I think part of it as well was that really all those activities that we'd sort of written down would have been nice if every project did them, but there's a certain amount of saving that you're going to get on a $500,000 project doing a constructability review in the pre-feasibility stage compared to one that's over 15 million. So it was more or less tailoring to SA Water's, I guess, risk appetite for how much they're going to actually spend on rework. Because on those small projects, you might not actually spend a huge amount on rework if you get things like that wrong. But we did have a baseline, you need to have interfaces and needs straight up, because those are the things that are managed worse so far. And then all the other bits on top of that are really risk management for it just being more expensive to do that stuff later.
Thank you. Nathan King, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Hi, Jenny. Hi, Alex. Long time no see.
You changed your background, mate. I am disappointed.
I'll fix it for next time. Sorry to disappoint. The question I'm quite keen to understand is how have you protected the process against distortion from people looking at the process that you've created, you know, the steps, the instructions, the guides, and then going, oh, geez, this looks like it's a lot of hard work. What did we do last time? Can we just copy and paste from last time and then use that forward? Or conversely, you know, it sort of leads into that quality aspect here of what happens when you get that new change manager that wants to just change things for the sake of it, you know, to make things look good, or you know, make a change for the sake of it to look like they're doing something. Excuse my flippancy here, but I'm quite keen to understand how you've protected the process from. I've put you on the spot here, haven't I? But you know, basically, how have you made it robust in that? And I presume one of the answers would be that you've made it as simple as possible, so that it's you know, rational, logical, and simple. But I'm keen to hear your thought process behind how you've done that.
There's two bits to that, really, from my perspective. I've been away from it for a while, so I'm sure Alex has got more to add. But the first thing is you own the narrative. Nobody's doing a needs analysis without us, without this man here. And you've trained 2 or 3 of the other personnel in the team so that it's an Aurecon person running that workshop. It's an Aurecon person writing up that needs register or that interface register. We have ownership of that, so we got ownership of the quality of the output at the moment. There will be people I'm sure we can trust later on, but right now we're trying to own that to maintain the level that we're looking for. The second thing is the gate review checklists. This isn't just about training the doers. This is also about training the managers and the checkers, because it won't matter if they're just going to sail through every gate review having not done their systems engineering artifacts. You know, if they're going to get to that point and forgive me, all the greybeards just go, yeah, it's fine, whatever, I'm cool with it, then it's been a pointless exercise. So those checklists get embedded in the overall governance. They have to go through those checklists as part of their gate and their project reviews, and they have to show maturity, not just in the standard design setup, but also in the SE framework. And then it's up to the organization to have the shiny spine to say, you didn't do that properly, go back and do it again, or justify it to me. And there does come a point at which we will lose control of this. And at that point, you know, we've done the best we can, and you've trained them, and we've tried to push it into them that if you don't do this, this will be the outcome. But yeah, you always lose control of it at some point, right?
From
Absolutely.
my perspective as well, you know, there's been as this thing's kicked into the new ways of working and, you know, has broader things to interface with, there's been a push to, one, for the training to make it so that more people can conduct this sort of stuff, or the needs registers are more easily able to be produced and all of that. And so I think your point of replicating work, that's in a sense built in by design. We have a set of, you know, for certain kinds of projects, we hope to build up standard needs registers whereby you take that set of ideas of, you know, if you meet this criteria, you should probably include this thing, and just change the names and the outputs and whatever else, and to make things a little more Lego blocky, so that you can take that, then go into an assessment, refine it, and then come out of the process, so that it becomes a bit quicker, but it also becomes more quality assured in that way as well. So there's less room for variation than there needs to be, but that's, I guess, more responsive. When we do more, once you get past the trial phase, once we have more implementation, more data, we'll be able to figure out whether that is a better approach, or you know, how we can create this efficiency that also creates quality and generates a better outcome.
Yeah, I agree. And having seen your stuff, it's also reduced the reliance on the implicit knowledge being required of the person using it, and dragging it back into the process. Yeah, I think it's pretty neat. Thank you.
Awesome. I think that's just about it. We're just about at time. If anybody's got one more burning question, maybe.
I've got one. When does your call for abstracts come out for your conference?
You're putting me on the spot.
I want
We-
your trip to Auckland.
Okay. We will make sure the best way to stay in the loop for all this sort of stuff is to be signed up for that MailChimp mailing list. The link will flash up on the screen in a minute here. We've got, we try to be for a small country. We've got a pretty active network, and quite a lot of people who are interested and quite engaged in what we're doing and how we're doing it. And so we'll be delighted to have some additional participation. But with that, I'm going to thank you, Jenny and Alex, and I'm going to do one more last screen share to wrap things up. I think that should all be up on the screen now. Jenny, and Alex, I can see you. Is it sharing right?
Yes, it's there. It's good.
Cool. So, oh, bloody heck. So March 25th is our next INCOSE NZ Meet-up. Systems Thinking in Operational Technology, Navigating Complexity in the Digital Age of Transport Infrastructure. Ed Kim of Sistra ANZ will be giving that presentation to us then. So if you're on our mailing list, you've probably got an invite. If you're not, or if you're on our mailing list, you will get the information for it and probably an invite. If you're not on our mailing list, lots of ways to connect with us. Lots of ways to make sure that you can stay in touch. We really do value having all of you with us, and we look forward to doing some more cool stuff together. So with that, I'll say thank you very much. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks,
So
Jenny and
much.
Alex.
Very much.
Awesome. Goodbye.
Thank you.
See ya.